So, what is really going on with Tammy right now? That question has been hanging over this season of 1,000-Pound Sisters from the very first moments, and the premiere wasted no time turning quiet tension into full-blown shock. 1 minute viewers were easing back into the familiar chaos of the Slaton family, and the next, everything that once held the show together was suddenly on the verge of collapse. Tammy didn't just sound irritated or overwhelmed. She sounded finished. And Amy's response made it clear this wasn't a dramatic spat meant to be patched up by the end of an episode. This was something deeper, colder, and far more permanent. Season 8 opened under circumstances no one really expected. Instead of a slow buildup of conflict, the audience was dropped straight into a breaking point. Tammy made it clear she would not continue on the show if Amy remained part of it. Not if things don't change. Not if boundaries aren't respected, but a direct, unmistakable ultimatum. What made it even more unsettling was how calm and deliberate it felt. There was no frantic shouting, no tearful backtracking, no hint that this was something she'd regret later. It landed with the weight of a decision that had been forming for a long time. Then came Amy's response. When she said Tammy was dead to me, it didn't come off like an emotional explosion designed for cameras. It was quiet, flat, almost detached. That tone is what made it hit harder than any screaming match ever could. Longtime viewers are used to the sisters fighting, insulting each other, and saying things they don't fully mean. But this felt different. There was no immediate apology, no confessional softening the blow, no producer-guided moment of reflection. Just a line drawn in the sand. And that's what sent shockwaves through the show. From the beginning, 1,000-Pound Sisters has never really been about weight loss alone. It has always been about Tammy and Amy together. Their shared history, their codependence, their resentment, their loyalty, and their constant push and pull have been the backbone of the series. Other family members came and went, storylines evolved, but the emotional center never shifted. The idea that the sisters might not be able to exist in the same space anymore doesn't just change the tone of the show. It threatens its entire structure. Behind the scenes, this wasn't treated as just another dramatic moment. People close to production have described the days after the premiere as tense and unusually quiet, filled with meetings and careful conversations rather than the usual scramble to capitalize on viral moments. Tammy's statement wasn't dismissed as heat-of-the-moment frustration. It was taken seriously, in part because of where she is now compared to where she used to be. Tammy isn't the same person she was in earlier seasons. After years of health crises, rehab, and setbacks, she has gained not just mobility, but independence. That shift seems to have changed how she views the relationships around her. For Tammy, this season isn't just another chapter. It's a line between who she was and who she's trying to become. People close to her say she's increasingly unwilling to stay in environments she feels pull her backward emotionally. Filming alongside Amy, especially under constant scrutiny, appears to represent something she believes she has outgrown. Whether viewers agree with that perspective or not, it explains why her ultimatum carried so much weight. It wasn't framed as punishment. It was framed as self-preservation. Amy, on the other hand, appears to be experiencing that shift as rejection. For years, Amy was the more functional sister, the one who pushed Tammy, supported her, and often carried the emotional burden of keeping things together. Watching Tammy pull away now, stronger and more independent, seems to have struck a nerve that goes far beyond the surface argument. Amy's words reflected not just anger, but grief. The kind that comes when someone you built your identity around no longer needs you in the same way. From a production standpoint, the situation put TLC in an impossible position. Losing Tammy would mean losing one of the most dramatic transformation arcs the show has ever had. Losing Amy would mean dismantling the original premise entirely. Filming them separately might sound like a compromise, but it introduces massive logistical challenges and risks alienating viewers who tune in specifically for the sisters' dynamic. And forcing them together would raise serious ethical questions, especially if one of them claims it's damaging to their mental health. What made the moment even more unsettling was the network's silence. TLC didn't rush to reframe the situation or reassure viewers. There was no press release, no carefully worded statement suggesting reconciliation. That quiet has only fueled speculation, with many interpreting it as a sign that there is no easy solution waiting behind the scenes. In reality television, silence often means negotiations are happening, and none of the options are clean. Public reaction quickly split into camps. Some viewers rallied behind Tammy, applauding her for setting boundaries and prioritizing herself after everything she survived. Others defended Amy, pointing out how much she sacrificed over the years and how painful it must be to feel discarded now. A third group began questioning whether the show itself had gone too far, wondering if documenting such a deep family rupture crossed a line from reality TV into something more exploitative. And this conflict didn't come out of nowhere. The groundwork was laid in season 7, when Tammy's life began to expand just as Amy's started to feel more chaotic. Amy's quick engagement to Brian after her divorce raised eyebrows within the family, and the fallout from that relationship added stress to an already fragile dynamic. Meanwhile, Tammy was experiencing success after success, including skin removal surgery and a new sense of confidence. The imbalance between them grew harder to ignore. By the time season 8 began, the resentment on both sides had reached a point where it could no longer be disguised as bickering. The premiere didn't introduce new tension. It exposed what had been building quietly for years. And once those words were said out loud, there was no easy way to put them back. This is where the show now stands. Not at the edge of drama, but at the edge of transformation. The question isn't whether Tammy and Amy are fighting. That's been answered. The real question is whether 1,000-pound sisters can exist without the relationship that made it work in the first place. And that uncertainty hangs over every episode that follows. As production moved forward after that explosive premiere, the focus behind the scenes shifted almost immediately. It wasn't about crafting dramatic storylines anymore. It was about containment. People close to the show have described the days following episode 1 as unusually heavy, with long meetings and very careful conversations taking place away from cameras. The concern wasn't how the argument would play on screen, but whether it could even be managed without causing further damage. Amy's words in particular raised alarms, not because they were loud or chaotic, but because they weren't. There was no attempt to soften them later, no request to clarify or reframe what she meant. For producers, that silence spoke volumes. In past seasons, Tammy and Amy's worst fights usually came with an emotional rebound. Someone would apologize, a sibling would step in, or a confessional would explain that things weren't really that bad. This time, there was nothing like that waiting in the footage. Amy didn't appear eager to walk her statement back, and Tammy didn't show any concern about how final her ultimatum sounded. Instead of cooling off, both women seemed settled in their positions. That alone made the situation feel less like reality TV drama and more like an actual family fracture unfolding in real time. Tammy's perspective, according to people familiar with her mindset, is rooted in how much her life has changed. For years, she existed in survival mode, dependent on others and constantly being told what she couldn't do. Now, after massive weight loss, rehab, and skin removal surgery, she finally has control over her body and her choices. That control appears to extend to her emotional environment as well. Being around Amy, especially in front of cameras, may represent a version of herself she no longer wants to be associated with. To Tammy, continuing to film under those conditions isn't just uncomfortable. It feels like undoing progress. Amy's reaction seems to come from the opposite place. While Tammy was transforming, Amy's world became more complicated. She went through a painful divorce, struggled as a single mother, and jumped quickly into a controversial new relationship. Instead of moving forward with the same clarity Tammy found, Amy appeared to lose her footing. Watching her sister pull away at the same time likely felt like abandonment. That emotional context gives weight to her dead-to-me statement. It wasn't just anger. It was the sound of someone protecting themselves by cutting ties before they could be hurt further. Legally and ethically, TLC now finds itself walking a tightrope. Networks are increasingly cautious about forcing cast members into situations that could be perceived as emotionally harmful. Tammy's ultimatum reframes the conflict as a mental health boundary rather than a personal feud, and that matters. Even if no formal complaints are made, the risk of appearing negligent is enough to influence production decisions. Amy's language, while not tied to an exit threat, also signals an environment that could become hostile if both sisters are pushed together for the sake of content. As these internal conversations were happening, the production team reportedly reviewed how much footage had already been filmed with both sisters. This wasn't just about editing. It was about whether the season could be reshaped if one of them reduced their involvement or refused to film certain scenes. Reworking a season midstream is expensive and disruptive, and it's not something networks do unless they feel they have no other choice. The fact that these discussions were even happening shows how seriously the situation was taken. Among crew members, the mood has been described as subdued. Conflict is expected in reality TV, but there's a difference between capturing arguments and documenting what feels like a permanent rupture. Several people involved in production have reportedly struggled with the ethical side of continuing to film something so raw. When a show crosses from dramatized conflict into genuine emotional fallout, the line between entertainment and intrusion becomes harder to ignore. Meanwhile, viewers were beginning to process what they'd seen. Initial shock gave way to deeper debate. Some fans argued that Tammy finally has the right to choose peace after years of chaos. Others felt Amy was being unfairly cast aside after everything she did for her sister. And a growing number began asking whether the show itself had become part of the problem, amplifying tension instead of allowing healing. That kind of conversation matters more than it might seem. When audiences start questioning the ethics of a series, it can affect everything from ratings to advertiser confidence. At the same time, the Season 8 trailer dropped, adding another layer of complexity. On the surface, it suggested hope. Both sisters are back. The family is present. Weddings, surgeries, and emotional conversations are teased. But beneath that hopeful framing, the tension is unmistakable. The trailer doesn't show reconciliation. It shows resistance. Tammy looks determined and guarded. Amy looks overwhelmed and defensive. Their arguments appear frequent, and neither seems willing to fully hear the other. The imbalance between them has never been more obvious. Tammy is stepping into independence, exploring life beyond survival. Amy, struggling with the weight of motherhood, public scrutiny, and personal mistakes, seems stuck in a reactive state. That reversal has changed the power dynamic between them, and it's clearly fueling resentment. For years, Amy was the one pushing Tammy forward. Now Tammy's the one setting boundaries, and Amy doesn't seem ready to accept that shift. This is why the conflict feels different this time. It's not about one argument or one bad decision. It's about two people moving in opposite directions at the same time. When that happens, even love and shared history aren't always enough to keep people aligned. And when cameras are involved, every misstep feels bigger, more permanent. As Season 8 continues, the show isn't just documenting weight loss or family drama anymore. It's documenting what happens when the foundation of a long-running series begins to crack. Whether TLC can find a way to adapt without losing its identity remains uncertain. What is certain is that the dynamic viewers once took for granted no longer exists in the same form. And that realization changes everything moving forward. As the season pushes forward, the conversation around 1,000-pound sisters has shifted again, this time away from just Tammy and Amy's conflict and toward the bigger question of whether the show itself is still being handled the right way. Longtime viewers aren't just reacting emotionally anymore. They're analyzing patterns, noticing what's missing, and openly questioning production decisions that may be hurting the series rather than helping it. In many ways, the sisters' fracture has opened the door to criticism that had been quietly building for years. One of the biggest complaints centers on Tammy's edit. While her transformation is real and undeniably impressive, many fans feel the show has gone too far in smoothing out her rough edges. Earlier seasons showed Tammy as volatile, demanding, and deeply flawed, which made her progress feel earned and dramatic. Recently, however, she's been portrayed almost exclusively through a positive lens, as if her temper and difficult traits disappeared overnight. Viewers who followed her journey closely don't buy that version. Growth doesn't erase personality, and by hiding Tammy's more complicated moments, the show risks turning her into a symbol instead of a person. That not only weakens the story, it makes the conflict with Amy feel less honest. At the same time, Amy's storyline feels oddly underdeveloped given how controversial her life has become. Her relationship with Brian raised serious concerns both inside and outside the family, yet much of that messiness has been glossed over. The audience knows about the arrests, the questionable decisions, and the rushed engagement, but the show rarely slows down to examine the relationship itself. Who is Brian really? How do they function day to day? What does Amy see in him beyond the whirlwind? By skipping over those details, production leaves viewers frustrated, feeling like they're being shown the consequences without the context. This uneven storytelling has made Amy look increasingly unstable without giving her space to explain herself fully. Instead of a layered portrayal of someone struggling under pressure, she often comes across as reactive and defensive. That perception feeds directly into the feud with Tammy. When one sister is framed as thriving and the other as failing, resentment feels inevitable. Good reality TV doesn't just show contrast. It explores it. And many fans believe that exploration is missing. There's also growing concern that the show has lost some of the humor and unpredictability that made it special in the first place. Early seasons balanced dark moments with absurd ones. Family trips, awkward outings, and cultural clashes gave viewers a break from constant emotional heaviness. The England trip, in particular, is still remembered as peak 1,000-pound sisters chaos. Lately, the tone has shifted toward non-stop seriousness, and while that reflects real struggles, it also makes the show feel exhausting. Viewers aren't asking for fake happiness. They're asking for balance. Another criticism gaining traction involves the expansion of the franchise itself. The introduction of similar shows has left some fans uneasy, as if the network is preparing to replace the original series rather than invest in fixing it. When audiences sense that a show they've supported for years is becoming disposable, loyalty starts to erode. That perception adds pressure to Season 8, making every misstep feel like evidence that the end is coming. Amanda's underused storyline is another sore spot. She's emerged as a fan favorite thanks to her sharp humor and fearless honesty, yet her personal life remains mostly off-screen. Viewers know she's dating, they know it's controversial, but they're never invited into that story in a meaningful way. In a season where the central relationship is breaking down, expanding other narratives could have provided stability. Instead, those opportunities feel wasted. All of this feeds into a larger concern about ethics. Reality television has always walked a fine line, but audiences are becoming more vocal about where they think that line should be drawn. When a show appears to benefit from unresolved trauma rather than growth, people start to feel uncomfortable watching. The Tammy and Amy situation isn't just sad. It's unsettling because it doesn't come with the promise of resolution. And without that promise, viewers are left wondering why they're being asked to witness it. From TLC's perspective, every option carries risk. Continuing as is could alienate viewers who feel the show has become too dark. Restructuring the series might dilute what made it compelling in the first place. Ending it preserves the legacy, but admits that the experiment has reached its limit. None of those choices are easy, especially for a franchise that once felt so stable. For Tammy, the future looks clearer, even if it's controversial. She's no longer willing to sacrifice her sense of peace for the sake of a storyline. That confidence, earned through years of struggle, has changed her position entirely. For Amy, the road ahead feels far more uncertain. She's facing public criticism, private pain, and the loss of the relationship that defined much of her adult life. Whether she can rebuild without Tammy by her side remains an open question. Season 8 now exists in a strange space. It's not just another chapter. It's a reckoning. Every episode is colored by the knowledge that the bond at the heart of the show may already be broken beyond repair. Viewers aren't just watching to see what happens next. They're watching to see whether the show understands what it has become. Whatever TLC decides, one thing is undeniable. 1,000-pound Sisters has crossed a threshold. It is no longer simply a story of shared struggle and transformation. It is a story about separation, boundaries, and the cost of turning real lives into long-term entertainment. Whether that story can still resonate in a way that feels honest and respectful will determine not just the fate of the season, but the legacy of the entire series.